Indeed. All right. And it is the top of the hour. So we've got a packed agenda today. So people will be coming in, but we're going to start right now so that we can make sure we hear from all of our speakers. My name's Steve Werblow, here with the Conservation Technology Information Center. It's an exciting day to be able to help moderate today's webinar on Conservation Connector. So a couple of notes. This is being recorded, so you are being recorded, and we're going to have the archived recording of this available in the next couple of days on the Connector.ag website, along with other resources. It'll also be on the Conservation Technology Information Center YouTube channel. We've got the chat. People are telling us where they're from, which is great. We're also going to have, if you look at the bottom, there's a Q&A, little voice balloon there with a question mark in it. That's how we're going to do questions and answers at the end of, well, the questions anyway, at the end of the program. So the last 15 minutes or so, we'll give everybody a chance to type in questions. You can upvote questions if there's things that are particularly relevant. And if we don't get to your question because of a volume or time issue, we will try to get answers back to everybody after the webinar is up. So with that all being said, it's a pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, Ryan Heiniger, from the Executive Director of CTIC.
Thank you, Steve. I won't take up too much time. As you indicated, we have an absolutely packed agenda with some great speakers, and we want to, of course, leave time for some great discussion as well. But I am so excited. Not only is this our first webinar of 2025 here at CTIC, but this project has been years in the making, but also being fast-tracked throughout 2024, and we were glad to debut this to the industry back in November in Minneapolis, and I know Dave and Brian will talk more about that too. But for those of you maybe not familiar with CTIC, we are a nonprofit organization headquartered in West Lafayette, Indiana. Very much, a member-based, member-supported. We have a great group of board of directors that help advise and guide the organization, and have been complete supporters of us throughout 4 decades plus. We were originally created within the National Association of Conservation Districts to help bring together both public and private sectors, help support by bringing data so that we were getting a better sense of the adoption at the time of course, no-till, reduced-till, conservation tillage. But like a lot of organizations, we've grown, we've evolved over the 4 decades, and here we are today with the further distribution of the Conservation Connector, which I think, with my own farmer hat on, is such a needed resource. So hats off to both Drew and Leif and others that have really conceived this idea and helped breathe a lot of partnership energy into making this possible. Last thing I'll just mention quickly before I hand it off to Lynn is to also flag that come May 6th and 7th, CTIC and about 150 of our closest friends are going to be gathering in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for our 18th annual Conservation in Action Tour. Different subject, but of course, again, getting on farm, helping learn more and share successes. This will be the first time that the tour has ever been held in one of the Great Plains states. So our early bird registration is now open, and would love to share more about that with you in the chat here shortly. So thanks again for taking time out of your schedule. And without any further ado, happy to introduce Lynn Knight, the national lead for the climate hubs for USDA. Thank you very much for being here, Lynn.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar. As you know, agricultural and forest producers have had increasing challenges dealing with unprecedented weather-related events, but also they've had more opportunities to access resources that both help them become more resilient to these changes and also to take a more active role in helping reduce climate-related impacts. Over time, there's been a greater number of programs and service providers available, and that can create some confusion among what may be available to producers. This webinar will introduce the climate the Conservation Connector, which represents a unique first attempt to gather all of the relevant program and service provider information in a single, easy-to-use system that can be used by producers and their trusted advisors to quickly and efficiently find what offerings best meet producer needs. The connector is a great example of the innovation that has been catalyzed through the USDA Climate Smart Commodities Program, aiming to increase the ability for producers to weather extremes and, on a broader scale, market uncertainty and profitability. As you watch this webinar, I encourage you to think about how you might be able to strengthen the opportunities to provide services, climate smart commodities and related services to this great platform that OpenTEAM and their partners have started. Thank you again.
That's great. Thank you, Lynn. I'd like to hand this over now to Dorn Cox and Maddie Delaney from OpenTEAM.
Great, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here and to celebrate the progress and the Conservation Connectors launch here. I'm Dorn Cox and founding principal investigator, but a farmer myself, calling from just outside of the University of New Hampshire. OpenTEAM was really formed because we recognized that to support transformation in agriculture, that we needed a new information architecture and access to knowledge, but not just knowledge, but land stewards need access to technical assistance and incentives, and we all benefit when we have access to knowledge that we can trust. And the concept of the connector really predated a lot of the work around the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities, but was an opportunity to really start to bring together the partnership, the level of collaboration that's necessary to create this trusted knowledge ecosystem. And that's really in the ethos of the acronym of OpenTEAM itself and its founding principles. Open because we believe that it should be free and accessible and trusted information. Agricultural ecosystem because it's not just the technology, but it's the communities that create those tools and technologies and information. And management because none of that knowledge is any good if it's not accessible and actually put into practice. So I think the connector here represents a key piece of that enabling infrastructure, the common infrastructure that allows us to move forward towards some of that transformation. And I think lays the foundation for so much more that I hope you'll be inspired to both provide feedback and think through not only what can you use the current system for, but what it can do and enable going forward. So I'll just pass it over to Maddie to introduce herself. And we, as an open collaborative community, really invite participation in this process. So and Maddie really is running the Marketplace Working Group, but among other things, but I'll pass it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Dorn. Thanks everyone for joining. My name's Maddie Delaney. I am the OpenTEAM project manager of Marketplace and Incentives, and I am the point person for the Conservation Connector project here. So I encourage folks, if you'd like to learn more about the project or about OpenTEAM's work in general, to please reach out to me. I'm adding my email to the chat here. And would love to connect with you, find ways that we can collaborate and that we can bring you in even more to this project. I will pass over to Leif from the Nature Conservancy.
Hey everybody, Leif Fixen with the Nature Conservancy, part of our ag team here. I'll just highlight that we're really excited to see this moving forward. You know, this started with an idea, you know, from Houston Engineering and a few of us kind of trying to figure out how we can get it moving, and we're just excited to see it here. We see this as going to be really important to help, I think, protect as well as like enable farmers to find out what sort of programs might be available to them, as well as what sort of service providers, you know, are out there. And then on the flip side of that, you know, you know, like one of our goals with our egg program is how do we get kind of that ecosystem of agribusinesses around the farmer more engaged in getting conservation on the farm. Well, one of the first steps in that process is making sure that they know what sort of opportunities exist out there for their customers. So, this checks a couple of boxes, important boxes for us. So excited to see it move forward. Excited to be working with everybody on the call here. And I'm not sure who I'm handing it over to.
Let's hand it over
it's
to
me. Yeah, it's
Yep,
me.
there we
you
go.
go.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah. So, and before I go, I just want to say a huge word of thanks to you, Leif, there at the Nature Conservancy, as well as everybody at OpenTEAM. We don't have Drew speaking here today, but he certainly was one of the folks that really got the connector started, and is in many ways is the inventor of the idea.
Yep.
And so it's awesome to see this moving forward, as you just highlighted. So without further ado, I'm just going to dive in and run through a few slides, which I think everybody's seeing okay. The connector is, we see it as a unique way to help farmers, ranchers, and trusted advisors discover what support is available for their local operations. As you'll see in a moment, the connector has a couple of directories. One on the programs that help pay for these practices, and in some cases, infrastructure enhancements that are intended to conserve, but also have a climate smart angle. And then the second directory is of service providers. You heard a word from our overall project leaders over at OpenTEAM, and it was great, and it has been great to work with both Dorn and Maddie as we've gotten the connector launched. The connector, obviously, as already mentioned by Dorn, is 100% free and will be using very open source architecture behind the scenes. So consistent with all of the OpenTEAM principles. It's already been mentioned that this is primarily funded by the USDA Climate Smart Commodity Partnership Program, but we also wanted to acknowledge and thank both the Nature Conservancy and the Walton Family Foundation, who have also contributed to the effort financially, which we are very appreciative of. So we are development partners, as is already mentioned, Houston Engineering and TNC. So why the connector? What is the need that's really being met here? And it's really all about the fact that there's, as mentioned by Lynn in her opening comments, there's a huge growth in the number of program offerings out there to help farmers put conservation practices to work on the ground. But because of that huge growth, there's actually the potential, and I would say actually the situation right now is it's a little bit confusing for folks because there's so many offerings. People don't necessarily have any single place where they can go to find out what's really available to them other than just a generic Google search. And the connector is intended to be much, much more sophisticated and much more helpful than that. In addition to that, there's a bunch of new buyers and programs out there who are potentially looking for producers to fill their programs. And even looking at the other side of the marketplace here, we have all the service providers and advisors who have far more customers who will definitely be looking for help with their practices. So ultimately, we see the connector being used by all of the folks mentioned here. Although this initial prototype, as you'll see in a moment, is really focused on the information that producers need. So if this is being launched as a web app, so the URL is Connector.ag, and we'll repeat that a couple of times so you'll be able to remember it. But the intention is to have locally relevant and up-to-date information on all of the programs that are out there, as well as the service providers to help implement those practices. Up until now, we've been using interns here at CTIC to get these directories preloaded, and we focused on the geographies indicated here. With respect to service providers, our focus has been on the upper Midwest primarily, as indicated. But our intention during 2025 is to expand the coverage of the program to include the entire country. And in fact, we already have, as you'll see in a moment, programs from across the country, and we'll be looking to add service providers. Up until now, we have been the ones who have been uploading this information into the database, but our vision for the connector is that it will be a self-registry process, and that's actually possible right now with the current version of the prototype. The overall project, as you can already tell, is very ambitious, and accordingly, we do have a diverse national coverage advisory committee who is helping us make sure that the connector, as it's developed, is really meeting all of the needs of the target users. We have folks from California all the way out to Pennsylvania, and representing a number of different sectors, both private sector companies, as well as not-for-profits that are out there and want to see more adoption of conservation practices. Very much in keeping with the overall mission here at CTIC, as Ryan highlighted at the top. The other thing that the advisory committee is helping with, and we've already had some progress in this area, is providing feedback on what other related initiatives are out there. And so I'll just highlight one in these comments, which is that we were invited by US Dairy to co-present at the Sustainable Ag Summit. And it turns out that dairy has a similar but very synergistic app that they've developed called the Navigator, which is more educational in nature, but focuses on their clientele, who are dairy producers across the country. And so we did a co-presentation as part of the Dairy Sustainability Alliance when we were together there in Minnesota back in November. And we continue to collaborate with the folks at US Dairy to make sure that the connector is going to meet their needs, as well as the sort of row crop growers that here have been sort of, if you like, the bread and butter of CTIC since its founding back in '82. The other role of the advisory committee is not just telling us about these programs, but then directly connecting. We've been having virtual calls with them, and we did get together with many of them at the Sustainable Ag Summit when we did our launch to the industry there in Minneapolis in November. So where do we stand right now with the development of the connector? Phase 1 development work began about 10 months ago. We had been doing a lot of talking about the connector for many years now, but the actual work started in March. And then we brought in along a couple of summer interns last year who helped populate both on the programs, but also the service provider side, more than 200 entries in each case. I've already highlighted the fact that the service providers are focused primarily on the upper Midwest, but we do have programs, at least some programs from every state in the country and even Puerto Rico. As far as the programs and providers that are in there right now, we did our best to get very accurate information, and in many cases, the data resulted from a one-on-one interview between our intern and the program administrator. However, our process going forward is to request that all of those program administrators and service providers do regular quarterly updates to their information. But that's a process that we haven't automated yet, but that is certainly one of our intentions as we get into 2025. We will be concluding phase 1. Currently, the plan is somewhere around the end of August, most likely at the Farm Progress Show, which this year will be in Decatur, Illinois, with a farmer-facing launch. There's a chance that we'll look at an alternative venue, but that's the one that seems to make the most sense to us right now. And after that launch that's focused on farmers, we'll begin phase 2, which is will be much broader marketing efforts, as well as adding some new capabilities to the connector that back integrate with other activities within the overall OpenTEAM action project, such as things like the Ag Data Wallet and some other things that have been worked on by the folks at OpenTEAM for quite some period of time. So stay tuned for more on that. If you go on to Connector.ag right now, and I don't mind if you go ahead and click over there while we're talking, this is the home screen that you will see after you close out a little pop-up. But it's intended to be a very quick and easy to use tool. Right now, the focus is on farmers to find all the programs and providers that are relevant for their location, for their commodities of interest, and for the practices and incentive types that are of interest to them. We have quite a large number of programs in the connector already, well over 200. And as I already mentioned, from sea to shining sea, and even off to Puerto Rico and Hawaii, because there are climate smart commodity programs in all of those territories. And this was through the great work of our interns that were with us last year. We also have a number of service providers that are already loaded into the connector. And again, these were loaded in almost exclusively by the interns, although now that the word is out, we are starting to get some service providers who are uploading their entries directly, which is ultimately our vision for the connector, is that they will be uploading their information themselves and then being reminded on a quarterly basis that they need to keep it updated, or else their listing would no longer show up in the connector. That functionality that I just mentioned is not in there yet, but that's the sort of thing we have in mind in order to make sure that the information is accurate and up to date, because obviously if the information is not accurate, then it will be of no use to farmers, and we want it to be as helpful as possible. The other thing that I just highlight at the lower left of that map is you'll see the distribution of the kinds of service providers that are in there right now. And up until now, the focus has been on row crops and on the states indicated. And it should come as no surprise that around half or so of the folks that are in there right now are focused on cover crops. And another third or so are focused on various kinds of conservation tillage. Not a huge surprise for those who are involved with the sorts of practices that are of greatest interest to farmers right now in the Midwest in particular. But as time goes by, as we spread the system out geographically, we start to get ranchers and dairy folk highlighted. Here, I think that the number of kinds of different conservation offerings that will be available in the connector will broaden significantly over time. So what are our next steps? We have been in conversation with a number of partners. I already mentioned US Dairy, but we've also been speaking to other commodity groups. And there are a number of other organizations out there that we see as really important partners, ultimately, to make sure that our directories are as accurate as possible, and that we, for instance, might have a way to automatically tap into the list of technical service providers and certified crop advisors, maybe retailing locations through ARA, et cetera. So we do see that there's a whole bunch of opportunities to partner with key organizations across the country to make sure that the process of keeping the directories up to date is as seamless and as efficient and automated as possible, that we, obviously avoid reinventing the wheel wherever possible. One of the things we will be doing over time here is for sure raising funds to help staff up to operate the connector on a full-time basis here at CTIC. And this will necessarily focus on two areas. Up until now, our communications and outreach effort has been very limited, and we haven't even really reached out to farmers yet. But that's something that we'll be starting to do this summer. And then also, I mentioned a number of times that there's this need to make sure that we automate the process of keeping the accuracy and completeness of these directories as high as possible. And so that's going to require a lot of focus in the coming months and years. So with that, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to everybody for their attention. I am going to stop sharing and invite my partner from Houston Engineering, Brian, to take us for a little test drive.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm going to focus on just walking you through the process as if you were a program lead or an organization that's running a program, or a service provider that's offering some service around implementing conservation practices. While the website is functional to explore for programs and define service providers. That'll come a little later. We'll probably have focused webinars around that. But for now, really want to focus for you on what the process looks like and actually how simple it is to self-register and enter a new program or service provider. So as Dave mentioned, when you go to Connector.ag, the very first thing you're going to see is a little welcome pop-up like on my screen. And this is really to hopefully just catch the attention of those program administrators and service providers and encourage them to think about creating an account and adding a program to the directory. A couple of things to note: we do have resources around a YouTube video that one of the interns at CTIC prepared that will guide you through the process of registering and entering in a program or a service provider listing, and also just a PDF file that is what we consider a user guide as well to help you. So really this screen is temporarily at this stage. It'll eventually go away as our focus later on this year shifts to our audience being producers, ranchers, and other, farm advisors, producers, advisors that want to find things in the directory. So the very first thing you would do is you would be directed, as in the pop-up, to go to the login screen and click register. The register screen is meant to be very simple. We're really just collecting information about you. So if CTIC needs to follow up, clarify what you put in the directory, follow up with someone at your organization if there's been turnover, whatever it may be, to make sure that we have the information to know who basically created the program or the profile listing. Also, just real quickly, just getting an idea of, what do you plan to add to the connector? That way, if we have a few people that registered, but we see they've never added anything to the directory, also is this a way for us to follow up with them to complete that process. So that's a little bit about kind of how simple it is to register. I'm not actually going to fill this out, but as soon as you do fill this out and click create an account, it will generate an email to you that will require you to activate your account, just to make sure, you say who you are when you register, just as a protection measure. But at that point, then you'll be allowed to log in to the actual connector. So I'm going to simulate as if I already received my email and activated my account. I can then come back and actually sign in. We have two roles that we consider in the connector. You're either a contributor to the connector or you're an administrator. Administrators would be staff from CTIC and others that need to review listings and stuff like that. As soon as I do log in, there's a couple additional menus that show up in the navigation. First of all, if you wanted to, you can update your profile information, contact information, your address, who you're with, change your password, things like that. But the main thing you would do is you're going to come in and either manage your programs or manage your service provider listing. Most likely, if you're a brand new user, you're not going to see any existing programs listed out for your account. It's going to be empty, unless we've gone through and you contacted us to affiliate one of our existing inventory programs to your account. So likely you see a couple of just test programs in my profile here. I'm going to focus on walking you through what it would look like if you added your own program. So I would simulate adding a program by clicking the button. Once again, we do have kind of those same resources listed here if you need to kind of review the process or have additional guidance. But I've gone ahead and just mocked up a fictitious conservation program about blueberries. I made this very specific. As you can imagine, programs vary quite a bit. You have very broad programs like NRCS's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, that basically provide all states and all counties eligible and basically all practice standards eligible to that program. And then you can have programs that are as narrow as being specific to a certain commodity, a practice, and or geography. So that's the wide range we're working with here, and keep that in mind as you look at this data entry form. So first of all, I would give my program a name. I call it Blueberries R Us. I can give it a program abbreviation. Think about equip. That would be a nice abbreviation that's very known. Then I can provide a brief program description, something we can display in a snippet of a card on a search result to catch someone's attention to the program. And then you can go ahead and put in a full program description in this box. This really has no text limit to it. It could be a paragraph, it could be 5 paragraphs, if you want to really describe your program in depth. We have the ability to link your website about your program to it, provide who would be the lead contracting organization, or who is the lead organization if it's providing financial assistance in some way, or if it's providing technical assistance. We ask for what's the primary funding source, and these options will be things like federal money, state money, local money, private dollars, philanthropic money, and so forth. And then if there are any other partner organizations that are affiliated with your program, you can list them as well. Some of the other information we're capturing is whether your program was basically part of a Climate Smart Commodities award. And also tell us if your program is essentially part of a parent program. A great example of this would be a lot of the Climate Smart programs have created sub-programs. So you may be part of a larger program. For example, Connector.ag is actually a part of the OpenTEAM broader Climate Smart Award. Another kind of key point that we're asking for is if there's any priority giving to historically underserved populations. This is a criteria or eligibility criteria a lot of programs are implementing. And then, this is kind of a conditional thing. So if I say no, there's no additional text box that shows up. But if I say yes, I do get the opportunity to describe what that means in my program listing. So that's kind of the general information we collect about the program. Moving kind of down the form, we also want there to be local contacts that someone could actually follow up with by geographies. So in this case, I've mocked up that my program covers basically 2 counties in the state of Oregon and 2 counties in the state of Washington. So in this case, I would be expected to put in a local contact for if I'm a producer looking for more information. Bob Smith is who I would want to contact if I'm in Oregon. So we just capture that person's information. And then another contact for those producers that live in Washington as a separate contact. Some programs don't want to give out individual contacts, and they do things like have a contact form on their website. We also have the ability to link a contact web form, and some programs have driven who your local contact would be through a contact form. So we're trying to provide a lot of flexibility for programs and not be rigid upon how you provide the essentially producer looking for more information about your program to a local contact. Just coming down the data entry form a little bit more, also mentioned you can have unlimited contacts. There is no limit. So if I'm a very broad program and run in 15 states and I have 15 different enrollment specialists, one for each state, I could list all 15 contacts here that would show up in the profile listing for that program. Next thing we want to do is just capture, what is the program providing from a standpoint of financial and or technical assistance. So this is pretty broad. We have categories of financial assistance, and these are multi-selects. So maybe your program only provides cost share. Maybe it provides cost share and equipment rental. Or maybe it only provides technical assistance or both financial and technical assistance. So essentially, you're just going to tag your programs with things that it's providing to the producer. If there's things that you do that you don't feel are listed appropriately here, we can always consider adding to this list. But we want to keep this standardized in a way that we can provide a nice searching set of searching criteria that are consistent across all programs. If I do select one of them, there's a lot of opportunities to put in additional narratives. So if I want to describe my cost share and equipment rental incentives a little bit more in detail, I could put more details in as a narrative. I can also do that about technical incentives as well, or technical assistance. Another component to a lot of these programs is they may or may not have criteria or eligibility to participate in the program or to get assistance from the program. Sometimes those things are geographically based. So for example, in my Blueberries RS program, a producer would need to be in either Umatilla or Morrow County, Oregon, or Benton or Walla Walla counties, Washington, to be eligible for assistance with this program. Now, like I said, this is just a fictitious one I made up. You see programs that might only be eligible to a certain state, but all counties in that state, to national programs like EQIP that basically eligibility is anywhere in the United States, no matter where you farm or ranch or whatnot. So that's very flexible. You basically provide what is your geographic requirements, if there are any. There are options to basically say all counties or all states in the dropdown. And then you can provide additional narrative around your geographic eligibility as well. Very similar to geographic eligibility, a lot of times we see programs have requirements around either commodity or practice. So what we have provided here is, in this case, my particular fake program here is only eligible to blueberry growers. I could have multiple commodities, or I could say it's eligible to all commodities. We've tried to break this down into the broad list that USDA considers as commodities. So the list is pretty long there. Same thing for conservation practices. This gets tricky. We all know that there can be a lot of alternative names for different conservation practices, but we had to stick to some standard. In the future, we've been talking about potentially developing alternative terminology for the searching interface, but we're going to want to have you at least tag it to the NRCS practice codes as the eligibility for now. And once again, you can provide some additional narrative if there's anything that's applicable to further describe. The last section that we want you to fill out is, what are the enrollment, reporting, or payment details that differentiate your program from others? So, is there an open enrollment period? Is it time-based? Is it just a rolling open enrollment period? We've seen a lot are basically open enrollment until funds have been exhausted. So we're trying to provide some flexibility how you enter and describe your enrollment period. Are there other data reporting requirements? Are there, can a contract be renewed annually? Is there limits on the assistance? We see a lot of variation there where it's a 1-year contract or it's a 3-year contract or something like that. Another very important differentiator is, can your payments or can your assistance be stacked with other programs? A lot of time there's a lot of interest in stacking incentives between federal funds and state funds, or state funds and private funds, and so forth. So we want you to describe, can your payments be stacked with other basically funding sources? And then there is a kind of a free-for-all narrative text box. If we didn't do a good job of capturing what makes your program different from others, you have an opportunity to describe the unique elements of your program for users to be able to search on that. So I would simply fill this out. It might take you 15 minutes. It might take you a half an hour. Just really depends on how much detail you want to put into it. But you always have the opportunity to come back and update it. So as soon as you update it and submit it, we put it in a status of what we call needs internal review. So what this will do is it'll generate an email to CTIC that there's been a new program added or updated, and it triggers them to go in at this point to review that program for accuracy, to make sure it's valid, we really want this data to be high quality and be moderated in some standpoint. So in this case, I'm just going to simulate it as if I'm CTIC. I'm going to log back in as administrator. And I'm going to then go to manage programs. And what you're going to see is I actually see the full list of programs, but at the top, I see some here that need internal review. Me as administrator, I'm going to come in here and look at this, make sure it all seems reasonable. We also have the ability where we tag that program with some internal notes. So we capture, how was the source of the information? Was it self-registered? Was it obtained from a website, an email, phone interview? A lot of the existing programs were obtained from one of these other sources. They weren't self-registered. And then just who is the follow-up person? And I could come in here and, add some notes that says, on 121 approved. These would be more internal notes. And then the big thing I would do is say, okay, this is ready to list in the directory. So I'm going to update it here. And as soon as I do that, I'm going to log back out. There's going to be a temporary program in here. And I'm going to be able to now explore the programs. We default sort this by the last updated date. So you can see my Blueberries R Us are live out on the site for everyone to find now. But I could come in here and filter this down. I know I'm maybe a producer in the state of Oregon. So I'm going to say I want to see all programs for Oregon. It automatically filtered the results down from 200 and some to 18. This would include things that are specific only to the state of Oregon, but also some of those more national programs. So further on down here, you're going to see some of the more broad programs from USDA or NRCS listed here. But then I could also say, well, I know I only grow blueberries, right? Are there any programs available for me that are only applicable to blueberries? So at this stage, it basically filtered the results down to only 8 results now. And I could further filter this down. Maybe I say, well, I'm only interested in brush management. That's what I want to do. I now have 7 programs. So as you can see, it's going to keep filtering the details and the number of programs that are eligible to what I'm interested in based on what we have in the directory. So that's a real quick snapshot. One of the things we're planning to do is auto expire these programs that have been self-registered, because we really want to encourage program administrators to get in the habit of quarterly going on and renewing their listing to make sure the information is as accurate as we can provide it to the users. We haven't actually implemented that, but that's our plan in one of the next iterations to start to implement that. That will include an email to the primary person that says, your program is set to auto expire in 15 days. Please log on and verify it. So that will be coming. So I've only really touched on the programs, but I want to say the providers is a very similar process. Just it has less information we collect about it. But one of the unique things about providers, I got to clear my filters, is we capture and make it more location based. So very different than programs that could cover entire states or all states. It's really hard to map that on a map. But for service providers that are very specific to providing their service in specific locations, as soon as you fill out the address of your organization or business, we're looking up what the latitude and longitude is for your provider profile and are plotting a point on the map. So for providers, there's going to be the ability not only see a list view of all the providers, but also a map view. So if you want to come in and see if there's any providers providing a certain type of service, residue tillage management, we have 16 providers and here's where they're located. So that's kind of a fun element to the directory that we're going to be able to provide that's different than the program. So hopefully that provides you with an idea how simple the process is to self-register your program and then to go on and be able to update it in the future. So I'm going to turn it back to Steve, I think, and we're going to spend a little time with some Q&A.
Great. Thanks a million, Brian. That was fascinating and just really thorough, well put together program. So we've got our first question in the Q&A, and I encourage folks to type in more as well. But this is a great one. Is there anything in place to protect producers from scams? Brian, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we want to make sure that some person is actually validating and moderating the listings in the directory, because if it would purely be self-registration, it's hard to really moderate that content. So at this point, we're really envisioning it always to be moderated and validated content by, CTIC. So that's really what's in place to protect from scams at this point.
In a similar vein, you mentioned the idea of funds that could be depleted, for instance. If I've got a program that I've entered and I see the sort of the end of the funding coming, and it's not part of the quarterly refresh that you just mentioned, who keeps track of the funding of availability? In other words, do I, as a program administrator, go back on and put my program on ice? Is there a feature within the listing that can say awaiting more funding, or not accepting new applications? How does that work as programs kind of ebb and flow through their funding cycles?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, what we would want the program administrator to go onto their profile and essentially probably change from open enrollment to it's currently not enrolling, and put a description in there of what that means. If the program is completely done and truly there is no more funding, then we would want basically to remove the listing from the directory, or there would be an option to hide it if you think there could be funding coming back to that program in the future. So there's a couple different ways.
Sorry to interrupt, Brian. I think we have the concept of an expired program, if I'm not mistaken.
We do. Yep.
Yeah, and in fact, I think there is one that is truly expired in the system right now. So it won't show up in a general search, but it is still there if the user were to log in and they got an infusion of new funding. But this is highlighting, Steve, thanks for the question. One of the issues that we absolutely want to make sure is airtight once we go truly live with this system to farmers, is to make sure that all of the information is as up to date as possible, because otherwise it's not meeting its purpose.
Great point. I'm watching for more questions to pop up. In the meantime, while we're talking about entering these programs, is there a version of search engine optimization that lives with the connector? Are there certain things that I, as a program administrator, should be putting into my little narrative boxes that will help my program be found by the people, the producers that might benefit most from it? Are there certain keywords or strategies to filling this out well?
I don't think we're at that level of sophistication yet. We may very well evolve there. We've been talking about creating some freeform search capabilities, possibly even based on some AI-ish sorts of functionality that I'm guessing our colleagues from OpenTEAM could keep us current on. But for right now, it's pretty freeform. I would say the way things work right now, as Brian already alluded to, is that if you go in and update your entry, it will by default show up at the top of the list. So we're at least encouraging folks to go in and keep their information current. Since I have the floor, and I don't think there are an open question right now, I'll just highlight the fact for those who haven't seen the screen yet that we do have an online survey available now through that QR code. And it's just developed using the SurveyMonkey tool, which I'm sure many folks are used to, but it is a very quick survey, just 3 minutes in length. But we would very much appreciate folks going into the survey, providing feedback about the system, and if you so choose, include your email address. It's not required, but if you choose to include your email address, we'd love to follow up with you on your suggestions, because at this stage of the development of the prototype, we're all about gathering as much user feedback as possible to make the system as useful to everybody as we can. So
that's great.
Hand it back over to our moderator. Sorry for that, Steve.
No worries at all. And in fact, we put the URL for the survey into the chat. And speaking of the chat, there was a question, and it ended up getting answered by a typed answer. But I want to air it just to make sure other folks get to hear the question and the answer. So this was, as an extension educator, can we sign in to see what providers are available in our state? And the answer is yes, anyone can view or search programs as service providers for free without any account. So, so yeah, this is a great opportunity for folks to kind of take a look at what's going on in their state. And if you do find something that where you see the absence of a good program, please reach out to those program administrators and encourage them to participate in the connector. I was going to ask about, again, waiting to see if other questions pop up in the Q&A or the chat. Are there parameters around the kinds of programs or projects that can be listed? Is there anything that's a no-go for funded projects that can end up on the connector?
Well,
I'll point that
our
to
answer
you.
is, yeah, I would say that at this stage, we've tried to cast a very wide net when it comes to both programs and service providers. The one thing being that it does need to relate to a conservation practice of some kind. And as Brian already mentioned, the default list that we're using right now, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is the list of conservation practices in the NRCS guidelines, which is a very long list. Perhaps, I don't know, 150 entries, if I'm not mistaken, Brian. So very complete, but that's all the federal programs. Now, there will be some examples of things that fall outside of that, especially on the carbon market side of things. And we do have those offerings listed as well. But in many cases, those carbon programs, in fact, are paying for the very same practices that we're talking about, such as cover crops, nutrient management, and tillage in the case of row crops. And if we're talking beef or dairy operations, it's sometimes something around methane or manure practices to control those emissions. So pretty broad net is my answer to you, Steve. But if folks go in and see that, oh, gee whiz, there's this type of program, we're not seeing it listed. That's the kind of feedback we are absolutely seeking right now, because we do want this thing to be as comprehensive as possible from the perspective of any producer of ag commodities here in the U.S.
Yeah, it could provide, I mean, one black and white answer would be, if I'm a service provider and I have a tractor for sale and I want to go on here and try to list it for sale, that would be a hard no. However, we're seeing a lot of conservation districts or companies that specialize in tillage equipment rental or drill, drill, cover crop.
No-till drills, yeah.
Stuff like that. That's absolutely applicable for
equipment rental, for instance, to implement some sort of a conservation practice. We have absolutely including those sorts of folks in the service provider listing, for sure.
Excellent. I'm keeping.
If I could.
Oh yeah, go for it, Ryan.
As a panelist to another panelist, maybe a question also for folks that are just getting this firsthand view of the program. So a question for Brian: from creating your login account to populating a program listing, roughly, for somebody that's brand new to it, what kind of timeline are we talking about? Is this a hour-long process, 30 minutes? What's your best estimate?
I would put it in the 15-minute to 30-minute range. It really depends on how much details you provide in some of those narrative input boxes and what's unique about your program.
And if you're a service provider, it's probably more like 5 minutes.
Correct.
It's
Yep.
very, very, very little work required because there's not very many fields. But yeah, I think Evan's guidance was that typically a half hour is very reasonable for a very complete climate smart commodity type program, which tend to be fairly complex, but some of them would be less. But I think 30 minutes tops, personally.
Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that folks understood, even though you walked them through, that this is an easy, light lift to get your program or service provider or multiple listings created.
And I always love the word easy when it comes to tech, because I'm the guy who ends up testing how easy something really is. So on that note, if I have a tech support need or a question, or for that matter, an idea about another kind of program or another category that could be added to the criteria, who do I reach out to?
Well, there's actually a feedback form on the connector itself. I don't know. I could stop sharing if you want to show it real quick, Brian.
Sure.
Why isn't this happening? Sorry.
Yeah, so in the bottom right corner of the connector screen,
in very, very small font,
there is a provide feedback link. And if I click that, essentially you just enter in your email address and the feedback you have. It could be a question, it could be support. This goes to multiple people. We monitor the email box, and we'd follow up accordingly.
Outstanding.
And of course, now that the survey is out, we're doing that in an even more organized fashion and collecting just a little bit of information about who's providing the feedback. Are they, a farmer, a program provider, et cetera? What state are they from? But it's a survey that only takes 3 minutes to fill out, and we'd be very appreciative if folks would go ahead and provide that feedback.
Perfect. And they actually have almost exactly 3 minutes till the top of the hour. So they could use those 3 minutes to go click the link in the chat, do the survey. Please do feel free to share your insight with us. Please do go on and list your programs. Go check out what's going on in your state or within your realm of conservation. Share this with your friends. We're going to wrap this up. We're going to put this recording out at Connector.ag in the next few days. And we'll be looking for continued opportunities to help connect programs with producers. So I want to just take that moment on behalf of CTIC to thank all of our speakers and organizers for being here today and for sharing their insights, and to wish everybody a great afternoon.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.